Imagine trading away the best player in your franchise's history and then still going to the playoffs the next year with a better team and getting a top 5 pick. John Schneider, we are not worthy. I'm not sure that I can live up to the last offseason from the Seahawks last year because that was just a masterclass. From trades to free agency to cap management to the draft. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, it's an impossibly high bar to meet, but I'm going to do my best to get close. Again, if you're familiar with this series, this is where we mock entire off seasons for all the teams in the top 10 in the draft, Seahawks included. That means mock free agency, mock salary cap management, mock trades, mock draft, mock everything. It's a long episode. There's a lot of high value assets we're working with here, and this is already a very good team that just needs one more really good offseason to probably make a run in the NFC. So that's my job. I'm going to try to get them as close as I can. And with that, let's get to part 1. First things first, as always, we need to look at the cap space available. And going into this offseason, Seattle had about $24.4 million available. That's not exactly a lot, but it's also not a little either. There's still plenty of room to work with, but we're going to make a couple strategic cuts just to give ourselves even more room to work with. Those 2 cuts are going to be Al Woods to save $3.7 million, and we're also cutting Gabe Jackson to save $6.5 million. I know that some people might object to cutting Jackson, but just looking at the tape last year, I'm not quite sure that he still has the feet and fluidity to survive as our starting right guard. If you look at a lot of the sacks that he gave up, a lot of it was on like stunts and games and stuff like that. I just don't really think that he's an explosive mover enough anymore to, redirect and pick up these stunts. And it was really causing a lot of problems in their pass protection. So for me, I'm just going to be addressing the guard situation later in this mock offseason to try to get more athletic at that position. But anyway, moving on from there, those 2 cuts are going to bring our total cap space up to $36.2 million. And obviously, we do need to allocate some resources for rookies, which, based on the number of picks that Seattle does have, that's going to cost $8.9 million of cap space, which then brings us down to $27.3 million of effective cap space that we, of course, can use in free agency. And with that $27.3 million, the first thing we need to address, obviously, is the Geno Smith contract that just came through earlier this week. And full disclosure, by the way, this actually is the second time that I'm recording this section. I recorded it the first time before the Geno deal happened, and literally the entire section was me making a case for re-signing Geno. So I'm happy they did that. They actually got him for less money than what I was originally planning on. It's a 3-year deal, $105 million total, $40 million at signing, so great value for Seattle. Geno played like a top 10 quarterback last year, in my opinion. He was excellent in terms of ball placement deep down the field. He was accurate under pressure. He showed off more mobility than I expected at his age. Like, he is obviously on the wrong side of 30 at this point, but like, he can still move around just fine. And when you take into account, the accuracy, the aggressiveness, the decision-making, the mobility, getting out of a whole lot of pressure because he had 2 young tackles that were kind of getting beat up towards the end of the year, and Gabe Jackson obviously isn't Gabe Jackson anymore. He was really dealing with a lot of pressure in that pocket and navigated it very well to me. So I really do think that he earned this contract and then some. I think this was the right move for Seattle, and rather than using my original contract terms that I was planning on, we're just going to go with that actual Seattle deal that just came through this week. In terms of first-year cap hits, as of the time of me recording this the second time, we don't know what the cap hit is, at least for 2023, so I reached out to my buddy Brad Spielberger at PFF, who literally does contract analysis for a living. I asked him his opinion on it, and based on his expertise, he predicted somewhere around a $10 million cap hit for 2023. I'm going to be ultra conservative with it, just in case, because I don't want to get myself into cap trouble here. I'm going to say it's a first-year cap hit of $15 million, and they spread out the rest over 2024 and 2025, again, just to be safe. And if we're going with that very conservative estimate of $15 million, that brings us down to $12.3 million of effective cap space left. And with that $12.3 million, we still have 2 more veteran Seahawks that I really want to re-sign, the first of which being Cody Barton. Once again, this might come as a little bit of a surprise to some Seahawks fans that aren't, huge fans of what Barton does on the field.
I'm a little bit higher on him than a lot of people. I still do think he has a lot of potential. Athletically, he is pretty gifted. He's not the most explosive linebacker in the world, but he's really fluid. He's really quick in short areas, and I don't explicitly think he's a bad player. I really wish that he would catch the ball more because he gets himself in position for interceptions. He just happens to drop quite a few of them, which is frustrating. But I don't necessarily see him as a liability against the run. I don't see him as a liability against the pass. I just think he's, solid. He's one of those middle-class linebackers that you're going to get for almost nothing. And looking at comparable linebacker contracts on the market, I think that if we gave him a 3-year, $12 million deal, $5 million guaranteed, with a $4 million signing bonus and the first-year salary guaranteed as well, which brings us up to that $5 million number, I think that's pretty fair for what I believe he would get on the open market anyway, and I really don't want to create yet another roster hole for myself. He already knows the system, he knows the building, he knows the culture, he's very ingrained within this team, and he's not bad, he's just solid. So I know, some Seahawks fans want an upgrade at linebacker. I'm just doing my best not to create a hole at linebacker by letting him walk. So we're bringing Barton back. The first-year cap hit, by the way, would only be about $2.3 million, so again, it's almost nothing. And if we deduct that $2.3 million from our $12.3 million of available effective cap space, that only brings us down to $10 million remaining. So we're in pretty good shape contract-wise, and once again, I only have one more deal that I really want to do with that $10 million, and that is bringing back Travis Homer. I'm sure some of you thought I was going to say Poona Ford, but nope. Travis Homer is the last Seahawk that I want to re-sign here. We can get him for 1 year, $1.8 million, just looking at the general running back market right now, especially because his role isn't really to run the ball that much or catch the ball that much. We have other running backs and will have other running backs on the roster for that. What I really want Travis Homer to do is pass protect. That is what he is elite at when it comes to NFL running backs. He's one of the best pass protectors in the league. And even though he had, statistically, I guess you could say a down year in 2022, he was credited with giving up 4 pressures. I actually went back and I watched every single pressure that he was credited with giving up. And honestly, only one of them was actually his fault. I really only think he gave up 1 pressure the entire year. He did have some injury issues with that ankle, but he should be fine for 2023. And I just kind of don't want to let him go right now because I think we still need a veteran running back presence that can take a lot of the third down work from Kenneth Walker, especially when it comes to pass pro. He is one of the best in the game at that. And, when we just invested a whole bunch of money in Geno Smith, I would like Geno Smith to stay upright. So, Travis Homer, you're still a Seahawk. Welcome back. And one more note on Poona Ford because we are letting him walk. I want you guys to realize that next year's defensive tackle class, not only are we going to draft one this year, and we'll get to that when it comes to the mock draft, but next year's defensive tackle class is absolutely absurd. So if we really want to spend money on one, I kind of want to stand on the remaining $8.2 million that we have and roll it into 2024 because some of the names that are available next year, at least on paper, we're looking at Leonard Williams, Chris Jones, Deron Payne, DJ Reader, Grover Stewart, Shelby Harris is going to be a free agent next year. So if we really want to save some money for him, we can do that. Quinnen Williams is scheduled to be a free agent, Danico Autry, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Javon Kinlaw, Christian Wilkins, even Dexter Lawrence and Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Next year's defensive tackle class or interior defensive line class in general is absolutely nuts, and at least some of them will make it to the free agent market. So I kind of want to roll over as much cap space as I can into 2024, and so we're just going to stand on that remaining $8.2 million and save every penny that we can. So with that kind of wraps up the free agency portion here. Again, we already re-signed Geno, brought back Travis Homer, brought back Cody Barton. And that's going to bring us to one of the most ridiculously OP mock drafts I think I could possibly do in this draft class. Not that it's unrealistic. It actually is realistic, and that's what makes it so scary. It is really, really special what the Seahawks can do with all their available draft capital. And we will get to that in just a second, but first things first, if you're in Seattle or the general, western half of Washington, and you want to catch a Seahawks game next year when we get the schedule out in May, or maybe you want to go out to a Kraken game or the Mariners game, or All-Star Weekend is going to be in Seattle this year, even concerts. I mean, Taylor Swift is playing at Lumen in July if you're obscenely rich and can somehow afford Taylor Swift tickets. Or if you want to go to Beyonce, she's coming to Lumen in September as well. Really, any concert you can think of, any sporting event you could think of, any live show you can think of, you can get tickets for all those over on SeatGeek. And if you see anything that you want to go to, anything at all, you can use promo code Brett, and that will give you a $20 discount on your first SeatGeek purchase. It's a really great app, super easy to use. The website's awesome. The UI is great. I have never once had any complaints using SeatGeek. So go browse the events over in Seattle. We link those down below. And if there's anything that you want to go to, again, promo code Brett, that'll give you $20 off your order. So thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this week's show and helping to make it possible. And with that, let's get to the most ridiculous Seahawks mock draft we can possibly come up with.
Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, to me, is the perfect Seahawks edge rusher. He's huge at 6'6", 270. He has unbelievable length at 35.5-inch arms, which is like top 4 percentile. And, oh, by the way, he has great burst and way better bend than he has any right to have at his size. In terms of tools, I put him right in line with Travon Walker last year, who obviously went first overall, but I do think that, at least as a pass rusher, Tyree Wilson might be even more developed than Travon Walker was. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that I think he's all the way there. You know, he's not as developed as a pass rusher as some of the other guys in this class, but I think he uses his length really well, especially on speed power moves. I think he's got a nifty little ghost move that I wish he used more often. And I think if he just adds a couple extra clubs to his bag, which he will be able to add because the Seahawks just hired Coach Brandon Jordan as their new pass rush specialist, who is one of the best pass rush coaches at any level of football, if we're being honest. I think if you take Coach Brandon Jordan and you give him somebody like Tyree Wilson with all those tools and all that length and all that power, he could turn him into one of the very best pass rushers in the entire NFL. I am very confident in that. In terms of role within the Seahawks defense, I mean, we know this is a very multiple defense that emphasizes a lot of front versatility, moving pieces around. They kind of roll out different fronts and different packages every single game based on game plan. They don't just line up and play the same every single week and say, come beat us. They will do a lot of matchup-based stuff. And so I think when you look at how Texas Tech used Tyree, where he would line up at 5 technique, he had some snaps at 3 technique, they would stand him up as like a quasi-outside linebacker in a 2-point stance. I think that translates to what the Seahawks would do with him as well, because sometimes they're an odd front, sometimes they're an even front. They'll give you a 5-man surface. They'll play tilt front sometimes with like 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, 1 linebacker. They do a whole bunch of different stuff there. So I think Tyree Wilson's alignment versatility is really key for them too. And that will also allow them to rotate him in with the edges, because you still got Ikenna Nwosu there, you got Boye Mafe, you got Darrell Taylor, and you can rotate him in with, the 3 down defensive linemen that you typically see, Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson, and some of the other rookies that we're going to be drafting as well here. So the fact that you can put him anywhere and he has the talent to play any of those spots at a high level makes me think that Tyree Wilson is a slam dunk top 5 talent. And one more time, I want to emphasize this before we move on. If you give somebody with these kinds of tools to a pass rush coach like Brandon Jordan, who is now on the staff as of like last week, I think is when they hired him. If you say, Coach, go turn this kid into Myles Garrett, I think he legitimately has the ability to be a Myles Garrett type talent. I understand the desire to draft a quarterback here, but I think you already have a good quarterback on the roster, and there are some really talented other quarterbacks that you can get later in the draft to develop behind Geno Smith. I really don't want to pass up the potential to get a game-wrecking defensive player here, and I think that this pick, more than anything else, would help maximize the Geno Smith window that we've created for ourselves. So Tyree Wilson is my pick at 5th overall. Trust me, we will get to quarterback later, but we gotta build this roster as much as we can, and we're gonna use the gift of that Broncos first-round pick to do it. From here, we're gonna go to our second first-round pick and get even more help for Geno Smith, this time at wide receiver.
When I first started this series with the Bears episode over a month ago at this point, which I filmed at the Shrine Bowl where Zay Flowers was practicing, and we got to talk to him that week and interview him for the podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. Go check out that interview. It was one of the best interviews we've ever done, and Zay Flowers, I mean, he already talks like a 10-year vet. He's amazing. But when I first started this series and I put Zay Flowers at the top of the second round to the Bears, even back then I acknowledged that he was almost certainly going to be a first-round pick. And to be honest, ever since that video dropped, now I'm not even so sure he's going to get out of the top 20. Hell, he might not even get out of the top 15. There is legitimate buzz for very good reasons that I probably can't get into here that he will be a New England Patriot at 14. That would not shock me at all, but even if he gets past the Patriots somehow, I mean, I would see him going to the Chargers. I could see him going to the Ravens. He's going to go somewhere in the first round. And to me, he's the best receiver in this class, so I think he's worth it. He put on 13 pounds of muscle since the end of the season and still hit the low 4.4s at the combine, and that speed definitely translates on tape. He's arguably the best deep threat in this class. And oh, by the way, he's a phenomenal route runner. He's got great ball skills. Even though he is on the lighter side, he's still really good at breaking press coverage. He's a very smart, cerebral player that had to learn like 4 different offenses during his time at Boston College and mastered all of them very quickly. If you want him to play outside, he could play outside. If you want him to play inside, he could play inside. I mean, you can give him jet sweeps. You can give him return duty. He'll do whatever you want, and he'll do it at a very, very high level. In terms of comps, the most common one that we see, ironically, is Tyler Lockett, and he's the exact same size as Tyler Lockett and has a very similar skill set to Tyler Lockett coming out, so Seahawks fans should be pretty familiar with how valuable that type of receiver is. And even though I have no intentions of moving on from Tyler Lockett either this year or even over the next few years, I think that having a third receiver on the roster that is young and cheap, but still ultra talented, just in case one of the top 2 guys gets injured, we're not going to miss a beat if Zay Flowers has to go in for DK Metcalf for a couple games or for Tyler for a couple games. We're not going to see any sort of drop off in production because he is that talented. And if you get all 3 of them on the field at the same time, DK at X, Tyler at Z, you put Zay in the slot, that's one of the best receiving cores in the entire league. So if you really want to maximize Geno Smith as a quarterback in this kind of 2-year window that we're building for him, you might as well give him one of the best groups of weapons that anybody could ever hope for and say, go get us a Super Bowl. I think he could legitimately do it, especially if he has this group. So do I think that Zay Flowers is actually going to be here at the 20th pick? To be honest, probably not. I do anticipate that he's going to go higher than this, even though that sounds crazy to a lot of people. I really do believe that. But if he is there at 20, look out for the Seahawks to take him, because not only do I think that it's a perfect fit in terms of, skill set to franchise, but I think the need is there as well. So watch out for Zay Flowers to Seattle. It's more possible than you think. With that all being said, we're going to leave the first round finally and go to the second round. This is very early in the second round, pick 37 overall. And once again, we're going to bolster the front 7. When Keeanu Benton was dominating down at the Senior Bowl a couple months ago, he was drawing a lot of favorable comparisons to DJ Reader, which I definitely do understand. I mean, he played a lot of nose at Wisconsin, and he has some pass rush versatility just like DJ Reader does. He could move from a 0 to a 2-eye to a 3 and be just fine. But for me, my comparison is even loftier than that, because not only do I think he could play 0 nose or 2-eye or a head up 2 or 3 technique, but I think he could play 4-eye and 5 technique as well and be really damn good at it. And so I think he actually profiles more as like a Cam Hayward type, which again is even loftier expectations, but I do think that he has that type of skill set. He would not have to come off the field on third downs. He's a legitimate pass rush threat and way better as a pass rusher than I think he's given credit for. Most people kind of see him as like a run-stopping nose, and I think he's way beyond that. I think you can put him at 5 and say, go beat this tackle in pass pro, and he could probably do it. Or you put him at like a loose 3 or a 4-eye, and you say, go beat the shit out of that guard, and he can do that too. So I think that kind of Cam Hayward, hybrid 3 technique, 5 technique, put him at 4-eye in like a tight front type of role where you keep him between the guard and the tackle and you say, just go fuck shit up. He can do that. And I think that that's a perfect role for him. And again, we emphasize front versatility in Seattle, right? Guys who can play multiple spots. He really does personify that. Whether or not he's available at pick 37, I have no idea. He could go in the back half of the first round very easily. But remember, there's a lot of really good players in this class. The edge class is insanely deep. The tight end class is insanely deep. Bijan Robinson is going to go somewhere in the back half of the first round. You're going to get like 3 or 4 tackles in the first round. So some guys will get pushed down, especially at quote-unquote lesser positions. And I do think that Keeanu Benton is a prime candidate to fairly or unfairly get pushed down the draft, even though to me, he's one of the 32 best players in this draft. So if he does get to 37, I think he's an easy pick for Seattle. He's a perfect fit for what they love. And this team desperately needs interior defensive line help like I need oxygen. It was really, really rough last year. At one point, due to injuries, they literally didn't have any nose tackles left. So having somebody who can play nose in a pinch and be fine, but also play 3 and 4-eye and 5 and all that stuff, that is imperative. They desperately need Keeanu Benton, and he's a perfect fit for them. From here, we're going to get to our second round pick. This is about 15 picks away, all the way down at pick 52. And once again, we're going to give Geno Smith even more support. Cody Mauch from North Dakota State has gotten a lot of attention during the pre-draft process, and not just for his teeth, but also for his play. And I think that all of the hype and, all of the projecting him to be like a top 50 pick is very well deserved. At one point I thought maybe he could sneak to the 3rd round just because he played at North Dakota State, which is like the Alabama of FCS. They consistently pump out NFL quality pros, but again, they're not playing against the best competition down there. So I thought maybe he could sneak to the 3rd round, but as time has gone on, I think that ship has sailed. I think he's going to be a 2nd round pick. He's too talented to go in the 3rd round, and the fact that he could play tackle or guard or center and do it well for all of them is just, again, insanely rare. In terms of his specific fit with the Seahawks, I do project him to kind of fill in at right guard for the departed Gabe Jackson, and he's way more athletic than Jackson is, at least at this point in Jackson's career. So all of the stunts and twists that were giving Gabe problems, I don't think would give Mauch as many issues because his feet are just quicker. He's more explosive. He's more athletic. He can pick up that type of stuff easier than Gabe Jackson can. And oh, by the way, because he is so nimble and so fluid and so quick, if you want to pull him out into space, like you want to run G lead, he's perfect for that. You want to run outside zone stuff, he can do a reach block. He's explosive enough for that. You want to run counter and power and, pull him and just absolutely wreck some poor safety, he can do that too. I think that even though he will play guard for some teams because of his arm length, the fact that he is such an explosive mover makes me think that he could be a top tier guard in the NFL. And for me, if I'm choosing between okay or solid tackle and Pro Bowl guard, I'm going to take the Pro Bowl guard every single time. And again, if somebody gets hurt at tackle, we can kick him out there and we'll survive. But I think if you just leave him inside and he's your starting right guard for the next several years, he could legitimately go to multiple Pro Bowls. I think he's that talented. I think he's that perfect of a fit for that spot. And Lord knows that Geno Smith would welcome having better interior protection than he got last year, because that was a little bit of an issue, if we're being honest. So after these first 4 picks, where we've got the trenches on both sides of the ball squared away, as well as bolstering the receiving core, I think it's finally time that we get back to addressing the quarterback situation and finally acquiring the other piece to this puzzle. I know. A lot of Seahawks fans are still going to be bitter that I didn't take Anthony Richardson at 5th overall, or, Will Levis, or whoever you happen to be obsessed with. I understand that. But watching Dorian Thompson-Robinson on tape, I see him also as an extremely high upside developmental quarterback that you put on the bench behind Geno Smith. And at some point in 2 or 3 years, I think that if you take his tools and you mold them, he could be a top-end starter in the league. If we're just looking at the tools that DTR has to work with, I mean, his arm is incredible. He's got legit gas to throw down the field. The velocity is absolutely there. And, oh, by the way, he's a very talented runner too. You know, he runs in the mid 4.5s. He's really quick in short areas. He breaks tackles constantly. He's an explosive mover within the pocket in addition to outside the pocket. I just think from a tools perspective, even though he's not as big as Anthony Richardson, you know, he's not 6'5", 240 plus or whatever Richardson is, I still think he's got decent size. You know, he's an average size NFL quarterback that also happens to have a howitzer for an arm and really good mobility. The knock on DTR is that accuracy can be spotty at times and decision-making can also be spotty at times, but to me, as somebody who's been watching him progress for 3 years now, he's gotten better every single season. I'm not saying that he's on the Jalen Hurts trajectory, you know, back when I had Jalen as a first-round pick to the Saints and people said I was fucking insane, but I had a very similar methodology for that pick too, which was, hey, here's a young, really talented, high-character kid whose development so far has only been positive. He's gotten better every single year of his life since he was 18 years old. DTR is the same way. He only ever gets better. So even though he's not ready to start now, I think if we're just projecting his development arc, I don't see why he can't be a starter in like 2 or 3 years. I saw him at the Shrine Bowl and he was great down there, by the way, and I really wish I took a video of him interacting with the Patriots coaching staff because it looked like they had fucking googly eyes talking to him. They love that kid. Really, everybody that talks to him loves him. And I think perhaps, you know, the biggest indicator of them all that I haven't brought up is that if you talk to Jordan Palmer, who has a whole bunch of other quarterbacks, you know, in his group this year, including Will Levis, the first guy he wants to talk about every single time is DTR. He's more excited about talking about DTR than Will Levis, and that's nothing against Will Levis, but I think it speaks to how much potential and how exciting he is as a prospect. Most people are projecting him as like a, you know, mid day 3 guy somewhere in the 5th round. That is not happening. I'm telling you right now, he is not going mid day 3. I think he goes top 100. I think he goes in the 3rd round. The potential is sky high, and if the Seahawks are able to draft him in addition to signing Geno Smith to kind of, you know, be the guy for the next 2 or 3 years, and then you see what DTR has down the line, that's a perfect situation for everybody. DTR will get to develop, Geno will get his money, the Seahawks have an immediate answer at quarterback, and they potentially have a future answer at quarterback too. So hopefully all of that made sense to you. And again, if you have any sort of additional questions about the quarterback situation or how to approach it, please drop those comments down below. But with that all being said, we finally have to get to the 4th round, the beginning of day 3, pick 123 overall. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because while researching for this video, I cruised through about 15 different outlets and all of their different running back rankings. And out of those 15 outlets, only 2 of them had Israel Abanikanda in their top 10 running backs. That made absolutely no sense to me. What you have here is a 5'11", 216-pound running back, which is like ideal size for the position, who also happens to run 4.3. Like, he's got legit high 4.3, maybe low 4.4 speed at the slowest, which sounds insane for that size, but when he gets into the open field, he is gone. Like, if I had to compare him to anybody in the NFL right now, he's like if Raheem Mostert did nothing but eat creatine shakes all day. Like, he's fucking huge. He's like 20 pounds heavier than Mostert, but has the same speed. And just looking at the type of offense that the Seahawks run, I mean, they do run a fair bit of wide zone, which Abanikanda is amazing at for obvious reasons, because when he hits the front side, he's gone. And they run some inside zone, you know, they'll run split zone. Sometimes they'll run some crack toss, get guys out on the edge, and Abanikanda's good at all of that. He doesn't have the same start-stop quickness of Kenneth Walker or the lateral agility. Like, he can't do the jump cut stuff that K-Walk does. But in terms of just straight line, slashing, home run hitter, Abanikanda might be the best guy in this draft, not named Bijan Robinson, in terms of doing that type of role. And I only say that because Bijan can do any type of role. He's unbelievable. But in terms of like the pure slashing wide zone backs, Abanikanda is really, really damn good at that. And, oh, by the way, he can catch the ball a little bit too. He's not the same level of receiver as Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs or, Tyjae Spears, any of those top guys, which is why he's going to go after them. But he's not a bad receiver, and I think that maybe he was underutilized a little bit in that role at Pitt. There were some times where he would get an angle route and just take off and score. They would give him some screens and he would get 40 yards out of it. So I do think that they underutilized him as a receiver. Doesn't mean that he's super polished at it, but I think he can do it. And just looking at his size speed combo, I would do anything that I could to give him as many touches as humanly possible. In Seattle specifically, again, K-Walk, he's the number one. He's a phenomenal young running back, and he was my top-rated running back last year. And then, of course, you have Travis Homer there, who we brought in specifically to do all the pass protection stuff. But if Walker gets hurt, knock on wood, obviously, we don't want him to get hurt, but if he does, or if he just needs like a few series off to catch his breath, I could put Abanikanda in there right now and feel good about it. I have no idea why he is so low in so many running back rankings. He is one of the most naturally talented backs in this class, and I think that, truth be told, he could go even higher than this. But for now, I'm just going to pretend that he's there all the way down at pick 123 and take the value where I can get it. From here, we're going to go down to pick 153. That's in the 5th round, 30 full picks later. And once again, we're going to strengthen the depth of the offensive line. Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas is one of the more underrated center prospects, or really one of the more underrated interior offensive line prospects in this class, period. I do think that he has some flexibility to play guard because of his size, so if you feel that Cody Mauch would be a better center, fine, you can have him play center, and then you put Stromberg at guard. Really, however you want to play it is fine with me. You just get your best 5 on the field, but again, kind of prioritizing positional versatility, I think that that's really key here, just to make sure that we can get the best 5 guys on the field. In terms of Stromberg's skill set at center, he's not the most athletic mover in this class, but I wouldn't qualify him as a bad athlete. I think he's a solid athlete, which you kind of have to be if you're going to play center in the SEC, because you're going against monsters every single week, and he really held up very well. He's strong in pass protection, he's very hard to uproot, and even though he doesn't excel at every single type of run, he's more of like an inside zone and duo banger than he is, somebody who's going to go reach a 2-eye on outside zone. He's not going to do that. But in terms of all like the vertical, get downhill, between the tackles types of runs, that is where he really shines, and his physicality really shows up. Oh, and by the way, he called protections too. He's very smart, especially kind of pre-snap, looking at how guys are lined up, getting their protections in order. We talked about that when we interviewed him at the Shrine Bowl. He's a really, really, really smart center. That interview should be coming out over on the podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast, somewhere in the next 2 or 3 weeks, especially after all the great buzz that's been building on him throughout the pre-draft process. People are really starting to discover Ricky Stromberg as a prospect. And I think that Seahawks fans, if you're looking into him, he is a perfect day 3 center for this team. Just because he's going in the 5th round doesn't mean he won't start games. I think he could legitimately start games early on this roster, and I think that he would do it well. We still have one more 5th round pick to get to, and it's actually only 3 picks after Ricky Stromberg at 153. This is round 5, pick 156. We've talked a little bit about Marte Mapu already on this series, but just in case you didn't see that earlier episode and you want a little bit of a refresher, Marte Mapu is a hybrid safety linebacker out of Sacramento State that has a whole bunch of length, whole bunch of explosiveness. He just happens to be like 6'3", 215, so nobody really knows what position he's going to play. For me personally, if I'm the Seahawks, I would try to add 10 pounds to his frame, get him up to 225, and then make him their 3rd linebacker. I think his cover skills are really, really good, and he's got better ball skills than Cody Barton too. So I think in terms of being a package player early on in his career, you could probably throw him in there as a dime backer, and then in nickel situations, in like obvious passing downs, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, something like that, if you want to throw him in there over Cody Barton as like a money backer type role, to kind of use a Nick Sabanese type term, that's going to be the linebacker that lines up to the passing strength. So against like a trips look, he's lined up to the passing strength, and he can carry a receiver deep down the seam. He can do a whole bunch of really rangy, unique stuff that most linebackers can't do in coverage. And I think that, if we're using him that way early on and he's just stealing snaps from Cody Barton in very obvious passing situations, I think that's a pretty good use of a 5th round pick. At least he'd be getting on the field. Obviously, we can give him special teams work too, but if we just add 10 pounds and say, you're our money backer in obvious passing situations, in nickel and dime looks, that's fine with me. As his career goes on, we can teach him to do all the other linebacker stuff, but for now, if he is just a piece that we use in coverage, that is okay. So Marte Mapu, keep his name on your mind. He's a really fascinating hybrid player that definitely will go somewhere in the middle of day 3. And with that, we have only one more pick to get to, and this one is extraordinarily special to me, and I think you're really going to like it a lot. This is round 6, pick 198. It is not every day that I get to do this, but I'm drafting one of my own subscribers here. This is Ikenna Enechukwu, defensive lineman from Rice. Played a whole bunch of spots on that defensive line. They would put him at 3 technique, they'd put him at 5, they'd put him at wide 9 and say go hunt, and he could do that too. And I had no idea going into Shrine Week that he was a longtime subscriber and, watched the videos, especially all the defensive line stuff, obviously because he's a defensive lineman. And he recognized me and, he came up and introduced himself to me. And that was a really surreal moment that I realized I've been doing this long enough that there are guys that, start watching in high school and college that are legitimately great ball players. And then they come out in the draft and I get to cover my own subscribers now. And it made me feel old, but also incredibly proud at the same time. And really, I fell in love with Ikenna, not just that week, but like watching him on tape since the Shrine Bowl and, kind of going back and doing my double checks here. If you really dig into Enechukwu as a prospect, he's fucking good. Like, legitimately great. Like, he's not going to be here at pick 198. I fully acknowledge that. This is a pie-in-the-sky pick. He's not going to be here in the 6th round, but I really wanted to talk about him because he's getting not a whole lot of buzz in terms of, like, national media. But if you watch the tape, I understand it's Rice. Not everybody has access to Rice tape. I happen to. But, like, if you watch Rice defensive tape, he's a fucking game wrecker. He's got length. He's got strength. He's got hip fluidity. Is he as fluid or as athletic as some of the top guys in the class, like Nolan Smith or, Tyree Wilson, obviously, any like that core group of 1st round guys? Like, he's not quite there, but he's not far off. And he played against some really top competition. I mean, USC, God, they were in hell just trying to handle him. They could not handle his power. There was a couple reps where he straight up hip tossed a guard. And I was like, holy shit, he's doing that to USC. If I had to critique anything, I think he could use some more counter moves because he does tend to get stuck a little bit if the first move doesn't work. And then he kind of has to like work his way out of it just through pure effort. And he is a super high effort player. Like the motor is nonstop. But I do think that he can get off of blocks quicker and cleaner if he just had some more counters in his bag. And he knows that. And, he might even be watching right now. So Ikenna, get some counter moves. But in terms of tools and effort and football character, I mean, he's got all of it. So again, I fully acknowledge he's not going to be here in the 6th round. I just wanted an excuse to talk about him because I love him as a player. And that is wholly independent of the fact that, he might actually be watching this right now. So Ikenna, if you're watching, hope you're doing well. Hope your hand is healing. And whatever franchise gets him is going to absolutely fall in love. He's a very talented player, very versatile player, and especially in a Seahawks defensive system where they love to move guys around and they love to compress the pocket with power and length, he's a perfect fit for them. I truly cannot wait to see where he goes. He has quickly turned into one of my favorite early day 3 defensive linemen in this class. And it's been a struggle to not mock him to everybody because I think everybody could use a guy like Ikenna Enechukwu. So that'll do it for this mock draft. Kind of recapping the whole thing. Again, we got Tyree Wilson, the freakish edge from Texas Tech at pick 5 overall. We got Zay Flowers, my favorite receiver in this class, at pick 20. We have Keeanu Benton at pick 37, Cody Mauch at pick 52, Dorian Thompson-Robinson at pick 83, Israel Abanikanda at pick 123, Ricky Stromberg at pick 153, Marte Mapu at pick 156, and Enechukwu from Rice at pick 198. For me personally, this is what I would do. I would give myself a short-term answer at quarterback with Geno, a long-term answer with DTR, and then just use all of my other picks to create the most hilariously stacked roster that Seattle has had in over a decade. I think considering the injury issues that San Francisco is having right now, this team should win the NFC West, and to be honest, they could go a lot further than that. This draft and free agency cycle could potentially create another Super Bowl contender in Seattle. I think the window is wide open, and to me, they would be wise to capitalize on it.
All right, that'll do it for today. Once again, thank you to Underdog for providing this amazing house that I've been recording all of these episodes in. I'm trying to bang out like 10 of them over this one weekend that I'm here. By the way, I'm in Phoenix. I don't know if I mentioned that before. I'm in the Underdog house in Phoenix, and it's just been incredible. It's been a great week. Lots of recording, lots of work being done, and they've really given me the resources to put out more content, at least related to the offseason and the draft, than I ever have before. So thank you to Underdog for making that happen. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this episode as well and helping to make it happen. I could not be more thankful for the sponsors that I have, and I could not be more thankful for the audience that I have, because you guys support my sponsors so that they support the channel so that I can keep making stuff like this. It's a wonderful community we have here, and I still pinch myself every day that it's real. It's been an incredible ride, an incredible year, and I thank all of you for being here. But with that being said, we are only halfway done with the top 10. We still have 5 more episodes to go. I think the next one is the Lions episode, which I already recorded, ironically. I recorded all these out of order. I'm not very good at this sometimes, but I think the Lions episode is next, and that'll be out in a few days, whenever that may be. So with that all being said, thank you once again for watching, and I will see you next time.